Let's break down our week 6 must-start defenses and streams. These are the defenses that are going to help you guys absolutely dominate your league mates here in week 6 of the fantasy season. All right, let's kick the video off with the Green Bay Packers, who were on bye week in week 5, but so far on the season, 11 total sacks, 2 interceptions, and they are averaging 6 fantasy points per game. And I think it could work to some of your guys' advantage that they were on bye week in week 5 because they only sit around 40% roster. The last time we saw them in action in week 4, they had negative fantasy points on Sunday Night Football on the road against the Cowboys, allowed a total of 40 points, in that game, and just had a sack, Michael Parsons sack, and that was it. Allowed 436 total yards and did absolutely nothing outside of that. But here in week 6, I do think that things are going to be a little bit different. I think that they're going to be one of the most added defenses on waivers this week because they're going to face the Cincinnati Bengals at home and Jake Browning at the quarterback position, unless something changes throughout the week where there's a change at quarterback for the Bengals and Browning gets benched. But, I mean, he played pretty awful this past week, but then he rallied a little bit and put up some points and threw a couple touchdowns. So I think they're going to stick with Jake Browning. But, yeah, early in that game, it was looking as bleak as ever. He still threw 3 interceptions, a total of 8 interceptions since week 2. This is absolutely a quarterback and an offense that we want to stream defenses against, and it doesn't get much better for them as they have the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 7. So if you guys own the Steelers, make sure you're paying attention to that week 7 matchup as well. But for those of you who can go grab the Packers, I know that their defense has been really good from a real life perspective. Maybe outside of that matchup against the Cowboys, they haven't been necessarily elite in terms of fantasy, but I think they have a really safe floor at home against Jake Browning and the Bengals this week, and they have a massive amount of upside opportunity for turnovers in this matchup. So if the Packers are out there floating around, they are a must-add, must-stream, must-start defense here in week 6 of the season. Next up, let's talk about the New England Patriots. And I am recording this before Sunday Night Football has been played, and I'll just go ahead and say I'm not expecting them to have a good day on the road against the Buffalo Bills whatsoever. Maybe they surprise us, but what we want to look at here is they're still averaging, before Sunday Night Football has been played, averaging 8.5 fantasy points per game. They've given you double digits in at least 2 matchups this year, and overall, 10 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 3 interceptions. Once again, before Sunday Night Football against the Bills has been played, they've been solid at times based on matchups, right, against guys like Tua Tagovailoa and Bryce Young at the quarterback position. And this week they get Spencer Rattler and the New Orleans Saints. And Rattler, once again, give him his dues. He hasn't been necessarily completely awful this year, and he actually hasn't had a turnover since week 3 of the season. But we know that there's still potential here, and that this isn't necessarily a dynamic offense in terms of the New Orleans Saints. So there's opportunity here in week 6 for a pretty safe floor. So I do like this spot for the New England Patriots. Once again, the Saints are just one of these teams who we kind of go into it just looking for a floor, and maybe there's some upside created if there is potential turnovers. But I really want you guys to pay attention to the New England Patriots, who sit at 21% rostered, because they get the Saints in week 6, then they get the Tennessee Titans, Cam Ward, in week 7, then they get Dylan Gabriel, Joe Flacco, whoever, in the Cleveland Browns in week 8, then they get Michael Penix in week 9 against the Atlanta Falcons. So this is a 4-week stretch that's really, really strong. And it gets a little bit tougher. Baker, the Bucks, Justin Fields, maybe there's something there in the Jets. But then they get Jake Browning and the Cincinnati Bengals. Then they're going to get Jackson Dart and the New York Giants. So there's definitely a lot of possibility for streaming potential in the New England Patriots over the next couple weeks. And I think you guys should go ahead and try and pick them up now, because they've got a good enough matchup here in week 6 of the season. But there's a lot of matchups coming up that you may try to want to stream the New England Patriots if you guys are streaming defenses this year. So pay close attention. Not the most upside here in week 6, but they're absolutely worth picking up now before this stretch of really strong matchups begin. Next up, let's talk about the Denver Broncos, coming off of a 6 fantasy point day against the Philadelphia Eagles. Allowed a total of 17 fantasy points, had 6 sacks, gave up 302 total yards, and that is it. They do sit around 87% roster, but if you guys own them, I don't want you to necessarily lose confidence in them. I still think that they are a really strong defense overall. And once again, like, I don't think anybody was expecting them to have a massive day against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I will say on the year so far, they have 15 sacks, but just 3 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, 1 interception. They really haven't done a lot of taking away the football, a lot of upside in terms of potential turnovers on a week-to-week basis, so we would like to see that change. But I think that anytime a team is facing Justin Fields, there is the possibility for turnovers. Although this past week, let's give Justin Fields some credit. He didn't turn the football over, looked really sharp against arguably the worst defense in the league and the Dallas Cowboys, but still, once again, Fields, a lost fumble in week 4, 2 fumbles in week 2. He hasn't actually thrown an interception this year. We'll give him his flowers there again, but still, there is potential when we're facing Justin Fields for potential turnovers. So I do like this matchup against the Jets here in week 6 of the season. I think if you guys own the Broncos, don't be too dissuaded by this past week against the Eagles. I still think that they are a very strong start here in week 6 of the season. Next up, let's take a look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team that was on bye week in week 5 that has averaged 9.5 fantasy points per game so far on the season, 14 sacks, 6 forced fumbles, 4 fumble recoveries, and 5 interceptions. But once again, when a team is on bye week the previous week and they have a strong matchup going into the following week, I always want to talk about them because they do sit at 63% rostered, but they may have been dropped due to the bye week. And if that is the circumstance, I really think you guys should run to the waivers to pick up the Steelers because they get the Cleveland Browns and Dillon Gabriel this week. Then the following week, they're going to have Jake Browning and the Cincinnati Bengals. Like we kind of mentioned earlier, this is a very strong 2-week stretch for the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Now, let's go ahead and talk about Dillon Gabriel because he looked pretty okay in his first NFL start. No turnovers, threw 2 touchdowns, 19 to 33, 190 total passing yards. But once again, those overseas games, London games, they can always be a little wonky, a little weird. So I think this is a much tougher environment this week for Dillon Gabriel. Still very solid first NFL start. I would feel more confident in starting the Steelers probably if it was Joe Flacco, but we still want to look at this as a good potential overall matchup for the Steelers who've had 12 or more fantasy points in their last 2 games. So still like this spot. It's a home game for the Steelers, coming off of an international game, kind of a weird week for the Browns overall. I think that Dillon Gabriel definitely has potential for turnovers in this matchup. So if you guys can get these Steelers off waivers, go ahead and do it. They are a set and forget the next 2 weeks. If you guys own them, absolutely start them over the next 2 weeks of the season. All right, the last team I want to break down here is the LA Rams, coming off of a very porous week 5 performance on Thursday Night Football. Just 1 fantasy point, allowed 26 total points, had a sack, gave up 407 total yards, and that is it. So far on the season, 15 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, 3 interceptions. They sit around 52% roster. They were a pretty popular kind of late week ad as we started to find out that guys like Purdy, Pearsall, and Jawan Jennings were likely to not play, and all those guys did not play in week 5, but it didn't really matter. The Rams didn't necessarily show up defensively. And now we got to address the elephant in the room. They're traveling to face the Ravens this week. What are we going to do about this? Because we don't really know what Lamar Jackson's status for week 6 is. But I think that there's a really strong chance that Lamar Jackson does not play in week 6 of the season because the Ravens are in bye week in week 7. So I don't know. I mean, they are a team that needs as many wins as they can potentially get right now, as this has been a really bad start to the season for the Ravens. So maybe there will be a push for Lamar Jackson to play. The Ravens are at home this week. If that happens, then don't start the Rams defense. We're not starting them against Lamar Jackson. Even if he goes into this matchup a bit banged up dealing with that hamstring injury, we're still not going to risk it, right? But if Lamar Jackson is ruled out for week 6, which I do think there's a potential for, because once again, the Ravens are on bye week in week 7 and could try to give Lamar Jackson additional time to rest up. Cooper Rush, starting quarterback, he had 3 interceptions this past week against the Houston Texans defense. Maybe we see some Tyler Huntley or somebody else in the mix here. Either way, it's a really good opportunity for the Rams defense. I know it can be hard to trust them after this past week, but the Texans defense, double digits this past week against the Ravens defense. I think that the Rams could come out here and do the same exact thing. As long as Cooper Rush is the starting quarterback. If it's Lamar Jackson, then we're just going to go ahead and get rid of this idea. But if the Rams get dropped because of their poor performance Lawrence this past week. They're out there on waivers, only owned about 52% of leagues. And Lamar Jackson is out in week 6. And I think that the Rams are a strong start as we move into week 6 of the season. All right, let's quickly run through the rest of the week 6 schedule. So in case you guys are wondering like why I didn't talk about certain teams or whatever, you guys can get some more clarity here. Eagles, Giants on Thursday Night Football. Yes, if you own the Eagles, they're 96% rostered. I'm not going to talk about them, way too highly rostered. They're facing Jackson Dart. I also hate Thursday Night Football matchups for defenses. Niners, Rams, a good example. But still, if you own the Eagles, yes, you're starting them this week. They are definitely a must-start defense. Seahawks, Jaguars, I think that there's a lot of opportunity here for both teams, but I really like the Jaguars. I just didn't really want to put them in here, having to record this before Monday Night Football, but they sit at just 19% rostered. I even like them going into week 5 against the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll see how things shake out, but this is a defense that causes a lot of turnovers. Before Monday Night Football has been played against the Chiefs, they have 9 interceptions and 5 forced fumbles on the season. They're going up against Sam Darnold and company in the Seattle Seahawks. Darnold looked really sharp this past week, but he still threw an interception. There's always some turnover potential there. And then, yeah, maybe there's an opportunity for Seattle's defense against Trevor Lawrence and company, but Seattle's defense has had -3 points this past week, so I don't know that I would trust them, but keep a close eye on the Jaguars defense, really regardless of how they perform against the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday Night Football. Chargers, Dolphins. I mean, maybe there's an opportunity here, but the Chargers defense looked really poor this past week. So maybe there's something against Tua there, but I'm not going to trust it, and I don't trust this Dolphins defense whatsoever. Cardinals, Colts. I mean, the Colts defense, definitely nothing to sneeze at here. They're coming off of a day where they had 17 fantasy points against the Raiders. They're always a startable defense. You never quite know what you're going to get out of Kyler Murray and company. Kyler Murray did get a little bit banged up this past week, so if you get any notice that Kyler Murray's not going to play in week 6, then yeah, the Colts run to the waivers to add them, but still, as long as Kyler Murray is active and healthy, even though they have some other injuries on this offense, I still don't know that I love this matchup, but the Colts are definitely a potential play. Cowboys, Panthers. I think that the Cowboys might come up in the streaming realm out there because Bryce Young really struggled this past week, but I just don't trust this Cowboys defense. They are the worst defense in fantasy scoring right now, so I know they're going to pop up and people are going to talk about them because Bryce Young had an interception and a lost fumble this past week. He also still threw 2 touchdowns, but I just don't trust them. I'm never a fan of just starting bad defenses like this just because they're in a potential good matchup. We still got to try and at least have something, and I don't know that the Cowboys defense have much of anything whatsoever. Titans, Raiders. This is one that I did want to talk about because I could see the Raiders coming up as a potential streaming candidate because we basically have stream defenses against the Titans every single week of the season. But once again, it's the Raiders defense. This defense is awful. In the last 3 weeks, they have combined for 0 fantasy points. 0 points in week 3, 4 in week 4, -4 this past week. I don't trust this defense whatsoever. I'm not going to recommend that you guys start them. Niners, Bucks is interesting. Mac Jones played really well this past week. I'm going to assume he's going to be the starter this week over Brock Purdy. So maybe there's something there if Mac Jones slips up and comes back to reality. He did look really good this past week. But the Bucks, once again, they just had a game where they had 0 fantasy points. So maybe there's something there. Not enough for me to recommend them to you guys. Lions, Chiefs, no thank you. I feel offense in that matchup. Bills, Falcons. I do think that the Bills have a chance here for a solid fantasy day against against Michael Penix and company. So if you own the Bills, I think you can feel good about them this week. But once again, they're 84% rostered, really highly rostered there. Then we have the Bears, Commanders. I think there's some potential as Commanders defense has looked pretty good over the last couple of weeks outside of week 4 against Atlanta. But once again, this Chicago Bears offense finds a way to put up points. So Commanders, maybe if like Caleb Williams has a bad day, but I think that at the end of the day, I don't fully trust them as a defensive start here in week 6 of the season. And there you guys have it. There are my must-start defenses and streams as we approach week 6 of the fantasy season. Don't forget, guys, as the week progresses, I'm answering as many fantasy football questions as I can in the comments down below. If you guys need anything whatsoever, please drop me a comment. I'll get back to as many comments as I can throughout the week. And while you guys are down there, it does me a huge favor if you guys hit that like button and that subscribe button on the way out. Really helps out the channel tremendously. And when the videos and playlists pop up as the week progresses, we're going to have everything you could possibly need here on the channel to dominate week 6 of the fantasy season. So make sure you guys check out all of the content throughout the course of the week. And with that, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.